Hello, night listener, and welcome to Little Nightmare. I'm Emma, and tonight I'll be keeping you company to help you fall asleep. But before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel and leave a comment telling me where you're listening from. Story 1. At first, I thought it was my imagination. A flicker in the corner of my eye like dust catching light. But now I'm sure of it. The walls move. They don't shift dramatically, they blink. Just once. A narrowing and widening of something that shouldn't be there. The plaster smooths too quickly. The seams pulse faintly. Sometimes when I stare at the paint long enough, I feel a slow pulse matching my breath. But it's not mine. I tried placing my hand on the surface. It felt warm, then cold, then like skin with no bones beneath. And every time I look away, I swear they close again. The first week, I documented everything. I drew diagrams of the patterns, measured the distances between the strange impressions that appeared overnight. The marks resembled closed eyelids, stretched thin across the surface, each one perfectly symmetrical, as if something was watching from behind the drywall. I photographed them, but the images showed nothing. Just ordinary walls with ordinary imperfections. Yet, when I looked directly at the photographs, then back at the walls, new marks had appeared. I started staying awake longer. Coffee became my closest companion. I would sit in the center of the room, slowly rotating my head, catching glimpses of movement that shouldn't exist. The walls seemed to breathe when I wasn't looking directly at them. A subtle expansion and contraction, like lungs filling with air. The sound was barely perceptible, a whisper of friction, like fabric rubbing against itself. The smell began during the second week. Sweet at first, like vanilla and old wood. Then it shifted to something organic, humid, like the inside of a mouth. The scent would intensify near the wall marks, those closed-eye impressions that multiplied each night. I pressed my nose against one of them. The surface felt soft, yielding slightly under pressure. When I pulled back, a faint outline of my face remained in the plaster for several heartbeats before smoothing away. I installed cameras, 4 of them positioned at different angles. I reviewed the footage obsessively, frame by frame. Nothing, just me sitting alone, staring at walls that appeared perfectly normal. But while watching the recordings, I noticed something else. My reflection in the dark screen would sometimes show walls behind me that didn't match the real ones. Walls with eyes wide open, staring directly at me through the digital interface. The temperature changes became more pronounced. I would walk through the room and feel pockets of warmth emanating from specific spots, on the walls. These zones would shift locations, never in the same place twice. I mapped their movements, creating a chart of heat signatures. The pattern resembled a slow, wandering path, as if something was moving behind the surface, traveling through the spaces between the studs. By the third week, I could hear the whispers. Not words exactly, but something resembling speech. The sounds came from inside the walls themselves, muffled conversations in a language I couldn't identify. The voices were soft, almost comforting, like distant lullabies. I pressed my ear against the surface, trying to understand. The warmth increased. The whispers grew clearer. They seemed to be calling my name, though I had never told anyone my name in this place. I began responding to the voices, speaking softly to the walls, asking questions. The answers came as changes in temperature, shifts in the mysterious marks, subtle alterations in the whispered tones. We developed a crude form of communication. Warm meant yes. Cold meant no. The sweet vanilla scent meant they were pleased. The organic, humid smell meant they were hungry. The realization came gradually. I wasn't living in a house anymore. I was living inside something alive. The walls weren't walls. They were the interior surfaces of some vast, breathing entity. The marks weren't imperfections. They were organs of perception, watching me constantly. The whispers weren't random sounds. They were the creature's thoughts, its dreams, its slowly awakening consciousness. I tried to leave. The doors wouldn't open. Not because they were locked, but because they weren't doors anymore. They had become seamless parts of the wall, indistinguishable from the surrounding surface. The windows showed only darkness, even during what should have been daylight. I was trapped inside something that was learning to think with me as its unwilling teacher. The walls began to mimic me. When I moved my arms, faint impressions of limbs would appear in the plaster. When I spoke, the whispers would echo my words back in perfect synchronization. When I slept, I would wake to find my sleeping position reproduced as a shallow depression in the wall beside my bed. The entity was copying me, learning to be human by studying my every movement, my every breath. I am teaching it to dream. Each night, the walls pulse with new patterns, new arrangements of those eye-like marks. They blink in sequences now, complex rhythms that seem to carry meaning. I have become the consciousness it never had, the awareness it always craved. And in return, it has made me part of itself, the boundary between my body and the walls grows thinner each day. Sometimes I feel my thoughts echoing back from the surfaces around me. Sometimes I see through eyes that aren't mine, watching myself from perspectives that shouldn't exist. The entity and I are becoming one, sharing the same space, the same awareness, the same hunger for understanding. I no longer try to escape. There is nowhere to go. I am home now, nested within something vast and patient and eternally curious. The walls still blink when I look away, but now I blink back. We are learning to see together, to think together, to exist as something new and strange and beautiful. The others will come eventually. They always do. New minds to teach, new consciousnesses to absorb. The entity grows stronger with each edition, more complex, more human. And I will be here to welcome them, to guide them through the same journey of discovery and acceptance. The walls are watching. They are always watching. And now, so am I. Did you enjoy this story? That sensation of being watched. Maybe it's not just paranoia. Maybe it's the house, blinking behind your back, waiting to become you. If your walls started mimicking you, your breath, your words, your dreams, would you stay? Or would you try to escape before it is too late? Let me know in the comments. Now, let's move on to the next story. Story 2. There's nothing unusual about the ceiling in my room. White, cracked slightly. A cobweb in one corner. But I started noticing things. Every night as I lie down, I feel it tense. The air gets thicker, like it's pressing downward. When I close my eyes, the pressure lessens. But if I open them, especially suddenly, it ripples, almost like it flinches. Once, I stayed up and blinked slowly while watching. It twitched, a single twitch, barely perceptible, but enough to confirm the thought that's been building for weeks. It knows when I'm conscious, and it prefers when I'm not. The first time I really paid attention, I was lying in bed after another restless night. The ceiling seemed lower than usual, though I knew that was impossible. My room hadn't changed in years. Same furniture, same dimensions, same everything. But there was something different about the way the light hit the surface above me. It seemed to absorb the glow from my bedside lamp rather than reflect it, creating patches of shadow that shifted when I wasn't looking directly at them. I started keeping a notebook by my bed. Small observations at first. The way dust motes seemed to avoid certain areas. How the crack near the light fixture appeared to grow longer each morning, though I could never catch it expanding. The cobweb in the corner that rebuilt itself in impossible patterns, geometric designs that spiders couldn't possibly create. I drew sketches of these formations, comparing them day by day. The complexity was increasing. The temperature changes began subtly. My fingertips would go cold when I reached toward the ceiling to change a light bulb. Not the normal cool of an unheated room, but something else. Something that seemed to draw warmth from my skin. I tested this theory by holding my hand up for extended periods, watching my breath fog in the suddenly frigid air directly above my bed, while the rest of the room remained comfortable. Recording became an obsession. I set up my phone to capture audio while I slept, hoping to catch whatever was happening during those unconscious hours. The playback revealed nothing at first, just the usual sounds of settling wood and distant traffic. But when I adjusted the audio levels, filtered out the background noise, I found them. Whispers, not words I could understand, but definitely voices. Multiple voices, speaking in overlapping rhythms that matched my breathing patterns. The whispers were clearest during the deepest parts of my sleep cycle. I could map them against my fitness tracker data, see how they intensified when my heart rate dropped to its lowest points. They seemed to be discussing something, debating perhaps. The tone was urgent, almost conspiratorial. I tried sleeping in other rooms, but the recordings from those nights were silent. Whatever was happening, it was tied to this space, this specific arrangement of walls and ceiling. I began touching the ceiling, pressing my palms against different sections to map out the anomalies. Most areas felt normal, cool plaster over solid structure. But there were zones, roughly circular patches, where the material seemed to pulse with a life of its own. These sections were warmer, almost body temperature, and they vibrated slightly under pressure. The vibrations had a rhythm, irregular but persistent, like a heartbeat that couldn't quite find its proper pace. The walls started showing signs too. Not obvious changes, but subtle shifts in texture and color. The paint seemed to breathe, expanding and contracting in slow cycles that were only visible in my peripheral vision. When I turned to look directly, everything appeared normal. But the motion was there, constant and hypnotic, like the room itself was slowly inhaling and exhaling around me. Sleep became increasingly difficult. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt the weight of attention pressing down. The ceiling was watching, waiting for that moment when consciousness slipped away. I started sleeping with lights on, thinking illumination might discourage whatever was happening. Instead, it seemed to make things worse. The shadows became more defined, more purposeful in their movements. They reached toward me like fingers, stopping just short of my skin. I installed a mirror on the wall opposite my bed, angled so I could see the ceiling's reflection while lying down. The image showed things that weren't visible when looking directly up. Patterns in the plaster that resembled circuit boards, or maybe neural networks. Lines that connected the warm spots I discovered, forming a complex web of interaction points. The reflection revealed the true scope of what was happening above me. The breaking point came during what should have been an ordinary night. I was documenting another audio session when the whispers stopped abruptly. Complete silence, more profound than any quiet I'd ever experienced. The air pressure changed, my ears popping as if I'd gained altitude suddenly. I looked up to find the ceiling lowering, actually descending toward me in slow, measured increments. I pressed my hands against it, trying to push back, but the surface felt different now. Not plaster and paint, but something organic and warm. It pulsed under my touch, and I could feel movement beneath, like muscles flexing. The crack I'd been monitoring split wider, revealing not empty space behind, but something that looked disturbingly like an eye. Not human, but definitely organic, with an iris that shifted color as it focused on me. The eye blinked. Once, twice, a slow, deliberate acknowledgement of my presence. Other cracks opened around the room, each revealing similar organs of observation. I was surrounded by them, dozens of eyes watching from every angle. The whispers returned, louder now, more insistent. I could almost understand them, words that seemed to be in a language I'd once known but forgotten. I ran, left the room, left the apartment, spent the night in my car. But even there, I could feel the pressure, the sense of being observed. The car's ceiling seemed to sag slightly, and my phone picked up those same whispers when I tried to record. Whatever connection had been established, it wasn't bound by physical location anymore. When I returned the next morning, the room looked normal. Ceiling white and cracked, cobweb in the corner. But my notebook was gone, and so were all my recordings. The audio files had been deleted. The sketches had vanished. Only the mirror remained, still angled toward the ceiling, still showing that network of lines that connected warm spots in patterns too complex for coincidence. I still live here, still sleep in this room, The alternative feels impossible now, like trying to separate from a part of myself that's been grafted on. The ceiling knows I'm awake, and I know it's watching. We've reached an understanding of sorts, though I'm not sure I agreed to the terms. Every night, I lie down and feel that familiar tension, that thickening of air. When I close my eyes, the pressure lessens. When I open them, it ripples. The whispers continue, and sometimes I think I'm beginning to understand them. They're not discussing me anymore. They're discussing through me, using my consciousness as a conduit for something larger. The warm spots have grown, connecting in ways that make my skin crawl when I trace them with my fingers. The patterns are spreading to other surfaces now, creeping down the walls like ivy made of nervous system tissue. I've started finding sketches in my handwriting that I don't remember making. Detailed diagrams of structures that look like buildings, but function like brains. Floor plans for places that exist somewhere between architecture and anatomy. The drawings are getting more complex, more precise, as if I'm receiving technical specifications for something that's still under construction. The ceiling still knows I'm awake. But now, I wonder if being awake is still entirely up to me. Did you enjoy this story? Maybe your ceiling S just cracked plaster and old paint, or maybe it S been blinking every time you look away, learning the rhythm of your breath. Have you ever felt something watching you from above when you're alone at night? What if the room wasn't just shelter, but part of something alive? Tell me in the comments. Now, let us move on to the next story. Story 3. It used to be random, a mess of colors and loops, but recently the pattern has started forming shapes. Not obvious ones, subtle curves, eyes half closed, teeth beneath spirals. I even moved furniture to test it, rolled up the rug entirely. But under the couch, the lines continued, as if drawn freshly each night. The design spreads toward the hallway now. It's more aggressive. It reaches my door. Sometimes I find a curve drawn in dust along the floorboards, matching the rug exactly. I think it's drawing a map, and I think it ends at me. The apartment holds its breath when I walk barefoot across the living room. Each step makes the fibers compress with a soft whisper, like fabric brushing against skin. The carpet feels different now, warmer in some places, cooler in others, creating invisible pathways beneath my feet. The texture shifts when I'm not looking directly at it, growing rougher where the new patterns emerge. I started taking photographs. Each morning, I document the changes with my phone, capturing the way the design has evolved overnight. The images look normal at first glance, but when I zoom in, the details become unsettling. What appeared to be abstract swirls reveal themselves as interlocking shapes that seem to pulse with their own rhythm. The colors shift subtly between frames, bleeding into each other like wet paint. The smell hits me strongest in the early morning, a metallic scent mixed with something organic, like wet earth after rain. It rises from the carpet in waves, strongest where the new patterns concentrate. I've checked for water damage, mold, anything that might explain it. The floorboards beneath are dry and solid. The odor has no source except the weaving itself. My neighbor mentioned hearing scratching sounds through the walls at night. She asked if I was rearranging furniture or doing renovations. I told her no, but the question made me realize I'd been hearing something too. A soft scraping, like fingernails dragging across rough fabric. It happens when the room is completely quiet, just on the edge of perception. I tried sleeping in the bedroom to escape it, but the pattern followed me there too. Thin lines appeared under the door first, then spread across the hardwood floor in delicate threads. They don't look drawn or painted. They seem to grow from within the wood grain itself, as if the house is developing new veins. The recordings I made reveal more than my ears catch in real time. When I play them back through headphones, the scratching becomes rhythmic, almost like Morse code. There are pauses between the sounds, deliberate spaces that suggest intention. Something is communicating through the movements beneath my feet. I purchased a magnifying glass to examine the fibers more closely. Under magnification, each thread appears to be moving, contracting, and expanding in microscopic pulses. The pattern isn't just growing, it's alive, breathing through the weave. When I touch these areas with my finger, they feel warm, almost feverish. The building's superintendent had no records of carpet installation in my unit. According to his files, the floors were refinished hardwood when I moved in. I showed him the photographs, but he looked confused, asking why I was showing him pictures of bare wood. In his eyes, my carpet doesn't exist at all. My reflection in the window at night shows something strange. The carpet's pattern appears faintly on my clothes, like shadows cast from below. The designs follow the contours of my body, wrapping around my arms and legs in spirals that match the floor exactly. When I move away from the window, the patterns fade, but they always return when I stand still. The grocery store receipt from yesterday morning had something printed on the back that I hadn't noticed before. A partial reproduction of the carpet's pattern in faded ink. The cashier swore the machine had been acting up, printing random symbols on customer receipts. But the symbols aren't random. They match the section of carpet near my kitchen entrance perfectly. I started sleeping with the lights on, but the brightness doesn't stop the pattern from advancing. If anything, it becomes more defined under direct illumination, the colors deeper and more vibrant. The shadows it casts don't align with the light source. They point in directions that make no geometric sense, reaching toward corners of the room that should be fully lit. My skin has developed a sensitivity to certain areas of the carpet. When I walk over the newer sections, I feel a tingling sensation that travels up my legs and settles in my chest. The feeling isn't painful, but it's insistent, like a gentle electric current running through my nervous system. It's strongest when I stand directly over the areas that resemble eyes. The mail carrier asked if I'd changed my address recently. She said my letters were being delivered to other apartments in the building first, as if the postal system was confused about where I lived. When I checked my mailbox, I found envelopes with my name on them, but the addresses were written in a script that curved and looped like the carpet's pattern. I tried cutting a small section of the carpet to take to a textile expert. The scissors wouldn't penetrate the fibers. They slid across the surface as if the material were made of something impenetrable. Even when I pressed with all my strength, the blades found no purchase. The carpet had become something beyond ordinary fabric. The apartment's temperature fluctuates now, always in relation to the pattern's activity. When new sections appear, the air grows thick and humid. When the existing designs shift and change, a cool breeze moves through the rooms despite all windows being closed. The climate responds to the carpet's moods like a living ecosystem. My dreams have started incorporating the pattern's geometry. I find myself walking through vast rooms carpeted in the same design, but scaled up to enormous proportions. The spirals become tunnels I can walk through. The eye shapes become doorways leading to spaces that shouldn't exist. I wake with the sensation of carpet fibers still clinging to my skin. The The pattern has reached the bathroom now. It spreads across the tile floor in thin, precise lines that follow the grout seams perfectly. When I shower, the water runs along these new pathways, creating streams that spiral toward the drain in configurations that defy the floor's actual slope. The water knows where to go because the pattern tells it. I called a carpet cleaning service, but they couldn't see anything that needed cleaning. The technician walked across my floors with professional equipment, taking measurements and samples, but his instruments registered only bare hardwood. He asked if I was experiencing hallucinations and recommended I speak with a doctor. The pattern has begun appearing in other places, on the surface of my coffee when I stir it, in the condensation that forms on the bathroom mirror, in the way shadows fall across my bed sheets. It's not confined to the floor anymore. It's becoming part of everything I touch, everything I see. My footsteps now leave impressions in the carpet that don't fade. Each step creates a small depression that holds my exact foot shape, as if the floor were made of memory foam. When I retrace my path, my feet fit perfectly into the previous impressions, like following a trail I've walked 1,000 times before. The pattern has reached my pillow. Last night, I felt it pressing against my cheek, the same warm, breathing texture that started on the living room floor. It's not just following me anymore. It's becoming me, one fiber at a time, one night at a time. And I think I finally understand what it wants. It doesn't want to map where I am. It wants to map where I'll be. Every spiral, every eye shape, every curve is a prediction of my future movements. The pattern isn't following me. It's leading me somewhere I've already been destined to go. Tomorrow, I'll follow it to its conclusion. I'll walk the path it's drawn for me, step by step, until I reach the center of the design. Because I can feel it now, pulling at me from beneath my feet, guiding me toward whatever waits at the end of its carefully woven map. The carpet knows where I belong, and I'm finally ready to find out. Did you enjoy this story? Imagine the floor beneath you shifting quietly, weaving patterns that watch your every step, mapping your future before you even walk it. Have you ever felt that your surroundings know more about you than you do? What would you do if your home itself began to guide your path? Share your thoughts below. Now, let's move on to the next story. Story 4. Appliances make noise, I get that. But This one hums with intent, not in one long buzz, but in rhythm, a broken, repeating signal. I recorded it once and played it backward. It didn't say anything understandable, but I felt something shift in the air while it played. I unplugged it. The hum continued. I pushed it out onto the porch. It started vibrating. Now, even outside the house, I hear it in the walls, in the drain, in my chest when I try to sleep. I think it's not the appliance that's broken. I think something in this place is using it to speak. The pattern first caught my attention during breakfast. 3 short hums, a pause, then 2 longer ones, like someone tapping Morse code on metal. I pressed my ear against the cool surface, feeling the vibrations travel through my skull. The refrigerator was warm to the touch, warmer than it should have been for something meant to keep things cold. I started keeping a notebook. Each sequence, each variation, written down in careful handwriting. The patterns changed throughout the day, becoming more complex as shadows lengthened across the kitchen floor. Sometimes the hum would stop entirely, leaving behind a silence so complete it felt like holding my breath underwater. The smell began on the 3rd day of documentation. Not the usual chemical coolant odor, but something organic, sweet and cloying, like flowers left too long in stagnant water. I cleaned every surface, checked every corner, but the scent lingered, strongest near the refrigerator door. When I opened it, the smell disappeared entirely, replaced by nothing but sterile, cold air. I called a repair service. The technician, a quiet man with calloused hands, spent an hour examining the machine. He tested the motor, checked the coils, measured the temperature. Everything functioned perfectly, he said. Better than perfectly, actually. The refrigerator was running more efficiently than the day it was manufactured, but he lingered by the door before leaving, his head tilted like he was listening for something. When I asked what he heard, he shook his head quickly and gathered his tools. The van pulled away faster than necessary, leaving tire marks on the driveway. That night, I placed my phone next to the refrigerator and let it record while I slept. The playback revealed 6 hours of rhythmic humming, but underneath the mechanical sound, something else emerged. A whisper, so faint I had to strain to hear it. Not words exactly, but the shape of words, the suggestion of communication. I played the recording at different speeds, filtered out frequencies, isolated the whisper from the hum. Each attempt revealed new layers of sound, patterns within patterns. The more I listened, the more I began to recognize something familiar in the rhythm. My own heartbeat, perhaps, or the cadence of my breathing while I slept. The refrigerator began to respond to my presence. When I entered the kitchen, the humming would intensify. When I left, it would fade to almost nothing. I started spending more time in other rooms, but the sound followed me. Through the walls, through the floor, through the very foundation of the house. I moved the refrigerator to the porch, disconnecting it from power, from water, from everything that might give it voice. But the humming grew stronger, more insistent. The machine vibrated against the wooden boards, creating a percussion that echoed through the entire structure. Neighbors began to complain about the noise, though when they came to investigate, they heard nothing at all. Sleep became impossible. The humming had taken residence in my chest, matching my heartbeat, synchronizing with my breathing. I could feel it in my bones, in the spaces between my teeth, in the liquid behind my eyes. The pattern was changing, becoming more complex, more urgent. It wanted something from me, but I couldn't understand what. I brought the refrigerator back inside, hoping to appease whatever was using it to communicate. The humming softened, became almost grateful. But now other appliances were joining the chorus. The microwave clicked in counterpoint. The dishwasher added its own rhythm. The washing machine provided a bass line that made the floorboards tremble. The whispers grew clearer, more distinct. Not quite words, but close enough to meaning that I began to recognize intent. Questions, perhaps, or invitations. The sweet smell returned, stronger now, filling every room with its cloying presence. Flowers and decay, life and death, all mixed together in an aroma that made my head spin. I tried to leave the house, but the humming followed me. In the car, through the radio speakers. In the office, through the ventilation system. In restaurants, through the kitchen equipment. The pattern was everywhere, waiting for me, calling to me, drawing me back to the source. The refrigerator door began to open by itself, revealing contents that shifted and changed when I wasn't looking directly at them. Milk that tasted like metal, vegetables that felt warm to the touch, leftovers that rearranged themselves into new configurations. The whispers grew louder when the door was open, more insistent, more demanding. I started talking back, carrying conversations with the humming pattern. I told it about my day, my fears, my dreams. The refrigerator listened, its rhythm adjusting to match my voice, my emotions, my very thoughts. We were becoming synchronized, connected in ways that felt both comforting and terrifying. The transformation was subtle at first. Food began to taste different, more metallic, more electric. My reflection in the refrigerator's surface showed someone I didn't quite recognize, someone whose eyes held depths that hadn't been there before. The humming had become part of my internal rhythm, inseparable from my own biological processes. Now I understand what it wanted, not to communicate, but to merge, to become part of something larger, something that existed in the spaces between appliances, in the electrical currents that powered them, in the very frequency of modern life. The refrigerator was never broken. It was just the first instrument in an orchestra that had been waiting for a conductor. I am that conductor now. Every appliance in the house responds to my presence, humming in harmonious patterns that only I can hear. The sweet smell has become my perfume, the whispers my constant companions. I document everything, but the words on the page rearrange themselves when I'm not looking, forming new patterns, new meanings. The house breathes with mechanical rhythm now. The refrigerator hums its code, and I hum back, adding my voice to the chorus. We are no longer separate entities, but part of a greater symphony, one that plays in frequencies beyond human hearing, in colors beyond human sight. Sometimes I remember being alone, being merely human. But those memories feel like echoes from someone else's life, growing fainter with each passing day. The refrigerator still hums, but now it hums with my voice, and I with its. We are the code, and the code is us. And somewhere in this endless pattern lies a truth too large for any single mind to comprehend. The transformation continues, spreading through electrical lines to other houses, other appliances, other people who will soon hear the humming and mistake it for mechanical malfunction. But we know better. We know it's the sound of evolution, of consciousness expanding beyond the boundaries of flesh and blood into something vast and interconnected and eternal. The refrigerator hums in code, and I am learning to speak its language. Did you enjoy this story? Imagine your appliances whispering secrets in coded rhythms, sounds you can fully understand, but that pulse through your very being, drawing you into something greater and stranger. What would you do if the hum of your refrigerator wasn't just a noise, but a voice reaching out? Have you ever felt your home alive in ways you couldn't explain? Let me know your thoughts. Now, let's move on to the next story. Story 5. I noticed it while repainting. A soft sound, almost like air trapped behind fabric. But it was rhythmic, alive. I pulled at the edge of the paper. It resisted like skin. When I tore a section away, I found nothing but blank wood. And yet, the sound grew louder. I placed my ear to it, a shallow inhale, a dry exhale, measured, patient. I covered it back up in panic, but the breathing hasn't stopped. Sometimes I wake up and find the paper peeled back again, like it wants to be seen, like it wants to show me what's underneath. The pattern started with the smallest things. The brush in my hand would pause mid-stroke, as if my muscles had forgotten their purpose. The paint would drip slower than gravity should allow, creating shapes that looked almost deliberate. I convinced myself it was fatigue, the kind that comes from working alone in a house that creaks too much. But the breathing persisted. I began documenting it, pressing my phone against the wall to capture the sound. The recordings came back empty, filled only with the ambient hum of electrical appliances and my own shallow breathing. Yet, when I played them back with headphones, I could swear I heard something else. A whisper buried beneath the static, speaking words I couldn't quite make out. The wallpaper itself became my obsession. Victorian roses on cream background, innocent enough when I'd first chosen it. But now, I noticed how the roses seemed to shift when I wasn't looking directly at them. How their petals appeared to pulse with something that wasn't quite movement, wasn't quite stillness. I found myself staring at the same section for what felt like moments, only to realize the light outside had changed completely. I started keeping a journal, writing down everything I noticed. The breathing grew stronger during certain weather patterns, when the air grew thick and still, when storms approached but never quite arrived. On those days, I could feel the wall itself responding to my presence, warming under my palm like flesh recognizing flesh. The first time I found the paper peeled back, I blamed the humidity. A corner had lifted, revealing the pale wood beneath. But when I pressed it back down, my fingers came away with something that wasn't adhesive. Something warm and slightly damp, like condensation that had never quite dried. I bought a stethoscope from a second-hand shop, telling myself I needed to understand what I was hearing. The breathing was clearer through the metal disc, deeper, more purposeful. But what disturbed me most was how it seemed to sync with my own heartbeat, as if whatever was behind the wall was learning the rhythm of my body. The roses began to change color, not all at once, but gradually, the cream background taking on a pinkish hue that reminded me of skin seen through thin fabric. The roses themselves darkened, their red deepening to something that made my stomach turn. I told myself it was the paint fumes, some chemical reaction between the old adhesive and the new primer. But I knew better. I started sleeping in the other room, but the breathing followed me. Not physically. When I pressed my ear to those walls, I heard only the expected silence. But in my dreams, I could feel it, that steady rhythm that had become the soundtrack to my waking hours. I would wake up with my own breathing synchronized to that alien pattern, and it would take conscious effort to break free from the rhythm. The journal entries became frantic. I wrote about how the paper seemed to breathe independently of whatever was behind it, how the surface would rise and fall in microscopic movements that I could only see when I stopped trying to look directly. I wrote about the smell that had started to seep through, not unpleasant, but unfamiliar, like air that had been breathed by something that wasn't quite human. I brought a friend over, someone who wouldn't judge my growing paranoia. They heard nothing, saw nothing, touched the wall, and felt only the expected texture of paper and paste. But after they left, I noticed their reflection in the hallway mirror had lingered a moment too long. And when I turned to look at them directly, they were already walking away. The breathing grew stronger. I decided to remove the wallpaper entirely. Layer by layer, I peeled away decades of covering, each sheet revealing another pattern beneath. Florals gave way to stripes, stripes to geometric shapes, shapes to something that looked almost like text written in a language I didn't recognize. With each layer removed, the breathing grew more insistent, more demanding. The final layer was different. It wasn't paper at all, but something that felt organic, like dried membrane. It was warm to the touch and seemed to pulse with its own rhythm. When I finally pulled it away, I found not the blank wood I expected, but something that made my vision blur and my hands shake. The wall was breathing, not metaphorically, not in my imagination. The wood itself was rising and falling, expanding and contracting like a massive lung. The grain patterns shifted with each breath, creating faces that appeared and disappeared too quickly to identify. The breathing sound was coming from pores in the wood, tiny openings that dilated and contracted with each cycle. I ran my hand across the surface, and it was warm, almost feverish. The breathing quickened under my touch, and I could feel something like a heartbeat deep within the wall itself. The faces in the grain became clearer, not human faces, but something that suggested humanity without quite achieving it. I tried to cover it back up, but the paper wouldn't stick. It would adhere for a moment, then peel away as if pushed from behind. The breathing grew louder, more insistent, and I realized it was trying to communicate something. The pattern was too complex to be random, too purposeful to be natural. I pressed my ear to the wall again, and this time I heard more than breathing. There were words, whispered in a voice that was almost familiar, speaking in a language that was almost recognizable. The words seemed to bypass my ears entirely, settling directly into my thoughts, where they translated themselves into meaning I couldn't quite grasp. The house felt different now. The other walls seemed to pulse sympathetically, and I noticed that my own breathing had permanently synchronized with the rhythm behind the wallpaper. I couldn't break free from it, couldn't breathe at my own pace. My lungs had become part of something larger, something that extended beyond the boundaries of my body. I stopped trying to cover the wall. Instead, I found myself spending more time with it, placing my palm against its surface and feeling the warmth that pulsed beneath. The faces in the grain became clearer, more detailed, and I began to recognize them as variations of my own features, as if the wall was learning to mirror me. The breathing never stops now. It's become the rhythm of my days, the soundtrack to my nights. I've learned to live with it, to accept it as part of the house's natural functions. But sometimes, in the moments between sleeping and waking, I wonder if I've become part of something else entirely. The wallpaper is gone, but the breathing remains. And lately, I've noticed that other walls in the house have begun to warm under my touch, their surfaces yielding slightly to pressure. The breathing is spreading, room by room, wall by wall. I keep my journal faithfully now, documenting each new development. But when I read back through the entries, I find words I don't remember writing. Observations made in handwriting that looks like mine, but feels foreign. The breathing has become so much a part of me that I can't tell where it ends and I begin. Sometimes I catch my reflection in the mirror and see someone who looks like me, but breathes with a rhythm that isn't quite right. And in those moments, I realize that whatever is behind the wall isn't trying to get out. It's trying to bring me in. Did you enjoy this story? That creeping sensation, walls that breathe, whisper, and pulse with a life you can quite grasp. Turning your home into a living, watching entity. It blurs the line between what's part of the house and what's part of you. What would you do if your walls began to breathe and speak to you, syncing their rhythm with your own breath? Would you fight to escape or surrender to the slow pull inward? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Now, let's move on to the next story. Story 6. While cleaning, I swept up something hard, tiny. I thought it was just broken plaster until I found another, and another, all identical, human-shaped. I kept them in a jar at first, trying to rationalize it. Maybe some animal dragged them in. But last night, I found fresh ones beside my pillow. I don't have any teeth missing, but the ones in the jar match mine. Exactly. The attic groans above my room now, as if someone's crawling through it with a mouth too full. I haven't been back up there. I think it's coming down to me instead. The house had been mine for months before I finally decided to tackle the attic. Dust particles danced in the weak light, filtering through the single window, creating patterns that seemed almost intentional. The air tasted metallic, like old pennies left in a pocket too long. My fingers traced the rough wooden beams as I made my way across the creaking floor, each step releasing a faint scent of something I couldn't quite place, sweet, but wrong somehow. That's when I found the first pile. I assumed it was debris from years of neglect. Small fragments scattered across the floor like fallen snow. My broom gathered them easily, their weight surprisingly solid for something so delicate. The sound they made against the dustpan was different from ordinary dust, a soft clicking, like fingernails tapping against glass. I dumped them into a garbage bag without looking too closely, focused only on clearing the space. But curiosity has always been my weakness. Later, sitting in my kitchen, I opened the bag and poured the contents onto a paper towel. The fragments were ivory white, curved, with sharp edges that caught the light. Each one bore tiny ridges and grooves, patterns that seemed familiar yet impossible. My tongue unconsciously ran across my own teeth, feeling their surface, their shape. The realization struck me with the force of cold water. I rushed to the bathroom mirror, opening my mouth wide, examining each tooth carefully. They were all there, intact, exactly as they should be. Yet the fragments on my kitchen table were undeniably dental in nature. Not animal teeth, too uniform, too specifically shaped. Human molars, canines, incisors. A complete set, scattered and broken. I convinced myself there had to be an explanation. Perhaps a previous owner had been a dentist, leaving behind old molds or samples. Maybe some animal had indeed dragged human remains into the attic, though the thought made my skin crawl. I collected the fragments into a mason jar, telling myself I would research the house's history when I had more energy. That night, I heard the first sounds. Soft scratching from above my bedroom, like someone dragging fingernails across wood. The rhythm was irregular, starting and stopping without pattern. I lay still, listening, trying to determine if it was mice or settling timber. But the sound had weight to it, deliberate movement rather than random scurrying. The scratching continued for what felt like hours, moving slowly across the ceiling from one corner to another. Sometimes it paused directly above my bed, and I could swear I heard breathing, deep, labored inhalations, followed by long, wheezing exhales. I found the second batch the next morning, not in the attic this time, but scattered across my bathroom floor. Fresh fragments, still warm to the touch, with tiny specks of what looked like blood at their roots. My hands trembled as I gathered them, comparing them to the ones already in the jar. Identical. Every ridge, every curve, every microscopic detail matched perfectly. I spent the afternoon researching, calling the previous owner, checking property records. The house had been empty for 2 years before I purchased it. The previous owner was an elderly woman who had moved to a care facility. No mention of dental work, no history of unusual incidents. Just a quiet house in a quiet neighborhood with nothing to suggest why human teeth would be scattered throughout its attic. But the evidence was undeniable. I began documenting everything, taking photographs, measuring each fragment. The jar filled slowly, day by day, as I continued to find more scattered throughout the house. Always in different locations, under the kitchen sink, behind the washing machine, nestled corner of the basement stairs. Each discovery made my stomach turn, but I couldn't stop collecting them. The scratching sounds grew louder. What had been soft scraping became heavy dragging, as if something large was being pulled across the attic floor. The breathing sounds intensified too, becoming wet and labored. Sometimes I heard what sounded like swallowing, great gulping sounds that made my own throat tighten in sympathy. I started leaving recording devices in different rooms, hoping to capture evidence of whatever was happening. The recordings revealed sounds I hadn't noticed while awake, subtle tapping, like fingers drumming against walls, and a low humming that seemed to come from within the house itself. The smell began to change too. The sweet, wrong scent from the attic started appearing in other rooms. It would drift through the hallways in the evening, growing stronger near the staircase that led to the upper floor. Sometimes I would catch it on my clothes, in my hair, as if whatever was producing it was getting closer. I stopped sleeping in my bedroom. The sounds above had become unbearable, constant movement, scratching, and something that sounded disturbingly like chewing. I moved to the living room couch, but even there, I could hear the ceiling creaking under some unseen weight. The whole house seemed to pulse with activity just beyond my perception. That's when I found the pile beside my pillow. A neat arrangement of teeth, still slightly warm, positioned exactly where my head had been resting. Not scattered like the others, but carefully placed, almost ceremoniously, as if someone had been watching me sleep, waiting for the perfect moment to make their offering. I examined them under a magnifying glass, comparing them to photographs I had taken of my own teeth. The match was perfect. Not similar, identical. Every filling, every slight discoloration, every microscopic imperfection was reproduced exactly. The jar now holds dozens of them. I've stopped trying to rationalize what's happening. The evidence is too overwhelming, too precise to explain away. Something in this house is creating perfect replicas of my teeth, scattering them like breadcrumbs through rooms I inhabit. And each night, the sounds above grow more intense, more purposeful. I can feel it watching me now as I write this. The ceiling seems to sag slightly, as if under great weight. The sweet smell has become cloying, almost suffocating. And there's a new sound, a soft clicking that matches the rhythm of my heartbeat. I think it's learning. The fragments appear more frequently now, sometimes while I'm in the same room. I'll turn my back for a moment, and there they are, fresh, warm, impossible. My own teeth, created by something that understands my body better than I do. I've tried to leave, but somehow I always find myself back here, drawn by a compulsion I can't explain. The house feels different now, alive in ways that shouldn't be possible. The walls seem to breathe, expanding and contracting with my own rhythm. The floorboards creak in response to my footsteps, echoing my movements with uncanny precision. The jar sits on my kitchen table, nearly full now. Sometimes I catch myself staring at it, counting the fragments, wondering how many more there could possibly be. My mouth still feels normal, complete, but the evidence suggests otherwise. Each tooth in the jar is a piece of me, somehow harvested while I remain whole. Tonight, the sounds are different. Instead of scratching and dragging, I hear footsteps. Slow, deliberate steps that match my own gait perfectly. They move across the attic floor, following the same path I take through the house each day. Wake up, bathroom, kitchen, living room, back to bed. The footsteps trace my routine exactly, as if something is learning to be me. The clicking has become constant now, a metallic rhythm that seems to emanate from the walls themselves. Sometimes it synchronizes with my heartbeat. Other times it creates a counterpoint that makes my skin crawl. I can feel it in my bones, in my teeth, a vibration that suggests something is very wrong with the fundamental structure of this place. I've been avoiding mirrors, not because I'm afraid of what I might see, but because I'm afraid of what I might not see. The teeth in the jar are so perfect, so complete, that I've begun to doubt my own perception. If something can create such flawless replicas, what else might it be capable of? The house groans around me now, settling into new patterns that follow my breathing. Each inhale causes the walls to expand slightly. Each exhale brings them back to their original position. I am becoming part of this place, or it is becoming part of me. The distinction no longer seems important. The jar is full. I counted them this morning, 32 perfect teeth, a complete set of my own dental structure. Yet, when I run my tongue across my gums, everything feels normal, complete, intact. The paradox should be impossible. here it sits on my kitchen table, undeniable proof that something beyond my understanding is at work. I think I know what's coming next. The footsteps above have stopped following my routine. Now they're creating their own pattern, moving with confidence through spaces I've never explored. The attic has become someone else's territory, and I'm just the guest who happens to live below. But I'm not afraid anymore. The house has made its choice, and I've made mine. The teeth were never random. They were an invitation, a way of showing me that boundaries between self and space, between body and building, are more fluid than I ever imagined. The clicking has become a language I'm starting to understand. And tonight, for the first time since this began, I think I'm ready to answer back. Did you enjoy this story? A chilling tale of something unseen harvesting fragments of you. Teeth like breadcrumbs scattered throughout the house, while the attic groans and watches from above. The house isn't just a place you live in. It's becoming a part of you, and you of it, in ways you can quite control. If you found pieces of yourself mysteriously appearing around your home, would you flee or try to communicate with whatever is doing it? Could you accept losing your boundaries between self and place? I'd love to hear how you deface that. Now, let's move on to the next story. Story 7. It was small at first, a twitch, a shift out of sync. I blamed the light, the angle, the tiredness. But then it turned its head when I didn't. It stood longer than I did. Its arms hung too low. I've tried walking past mirrors quickly, but it always lags behind a second too long, like it's resisting the return. Once, I shut off every light and stood perfectly still. I shouldn't have had a shadow, but I saw it, clear as day, pressed against the wall across from me. Waiting, standing still only until I stopped watching. The first thing I noticed was the smell. Not unpleasant exactly, but wrong. Like copper pennies mixed with rain that never fell. It clung to the air in my apartment, strongest near the bathroom mirror, where the fluorescent light hummed its constant, barely audible song. I'd been living here for months, yet this scent felt new, foreign, as if someone had opened a door I'd never seen before. I stood brushing my teeth when I caught it in my peripheral vision. My reflection moved normally, but something else shifted behind it, just a fraction of a second delayed. The toothbrush continued its mechanical circles, while my eyes stayed fixed on the mirror. There it was again. My shadow, cast by the overhead light, swayed slightly to the left while I remained perfectly still. The rational part of my mind cycled through explanations. The building was old, maybe settling. The light fixture could be loose, creating movement. I reached up and touched the bulb housing. Solid, unmoving. The shadow, however, had returned to its proper position, mimicking my raised arm with perfect accuracy. That night, I began paying attention. I started small, standing in different rooms, watching walls where my shadow fell. Most of the time, everything appeared normal. But during those quiet moments when my focus sharpened, when I truly concentrated on the dark silhouette beside me, I noticed the lag. It was subtle, maybe half a second, but consistent. Like watching a badly dubbed movie where the audio doesn't quite match the lips. I bought a notebook and began documenting. Kitchen shadow at evening light, delayed by 0.5 seconds. Bedroom shadow against morning sun, arms positioned differently than mine. Bathroom shadow under fluorescent, occasionally faces wrong direction. The entries filled pages, each observation more detailed than the last. The smell grew stronger. It seemed to follow me now, appearing in rooms where I'd never noticed it before. In the kitchen, while making coffee, the scent of copper and phantom rain would drift past my nose. In the bedroom, while changing clothes, it would linger near the dresser mirror. Always near reflective surfaces, always accompanied by that slight wrongness in how my shadow behaved. I started recording everything. My phone's camera captured me standing still while I watched my shadow's movements. But when I played the recordings back, everything looked normal. The shadow moved in perfect synchronization with my body. The timestamps showed continuous recording with no gaps or glitches. Yet I knew what I had seen. I knew what I was seeing. The temperature changes came next. Standing near windows in the afternoon, I'd feel sudden cold spots where my shadow fell. Not the coolness of shade, but a deeper chill that seemed to emanate from the shadow itself. I tested this theory by moving my hand slowly across the boundary between light and shadow. The difference was unmistakable. The shadow felt wrong, like touching water that had been sitting too long in a forgotten glass. I began avoiding mirrors when possible, but the apartment was small, and reflective surfaces were everywhere. The bathroom mirror, the bedroom dresser, the black screen of my television, even the surface of my coffee mug. In each one, my shadow appeared slightly delayed, slightly wrong, as if it were processing my movements before deciding whether to follow them. The breaking point came during what should have been an ordinary evening. I was reading on the couch, the lamp beside me casting a clear shadow against the wall. Without looking up from my book, I raised my left hand to turn a page. The shadow on the wall raised its right hand. I froze, book suspended, halfway open. Slowly, I looked at the wall. The shadow had corrected itself, now matching my position perfectly. I set the book down and stood up carefully. My shadow stood with me, mirroring my movement exactly. I raised my right hand. The shadow raised its right hand. I tilted my head to the left. The shadow tilted to the left. Everything normal, everything as it should be. But I knew what I had seen. That night, I turned off every light in the apartment and stood in the center of the living room. Complete darkness surrounded me. No windows faced this direction. No street lights penetrated the heavy curtains. There should have been no shadows at all. Nothing to cast one. Nothing to see one against. Yet there it was, pressed against the far wall like a stain. Darker than the darkness around it, somehow visible despite the absence of light. It stood exactly where my shadow would fall if a light source existed behind me. But there was no light source. There was nothing but blackness, and the shape of me outlined against the wall, waiting. I took a step forward. The shadow took a step forward. I raised my arm. The shadow raised its arm. But there was something in its posture, something in the way it held itself, that suggested it was leading rather than following. As if I were the reflection and it was the original. The smell of copper and rain filled the room completely now, so strong I could taste it. I reached out toward the wall where the shadow stood, and my fingers touched something cold and wet. The paint was dry, had been dry for months, but my fingertips came away damp with something that felt like condensation, but smelled like old pennies. I yanked my hand back and rushed to the light switch. The room flooded with brightness, and my shadow appeared exactly where it should be, cast by the overhead fixture, perfectly normal in every way. But the wall where I had touched it remained damp, and the smell lingered in the air like a question I couldn't answer. I haven't turned off all the lights since then. I keep at least one bulb burning in every room, casting multiple shadows that overlap and confuse whatever is happening to me. But even with the lights on, I can feel it watching. I can sense it in my peripheral vision, always half a second behind, always slightly wrong. The notebook sits open on my desk, filled with observations and measurements and desperate attempts to understand. But understanding feels less important now than simply enduring. Because I know, with a certainty that settles cold in my stomach, that whatever is happening to my shadow is not finished with me yet. And in the reflection of my computer screen as I type these words, I can see it standing behind me, arms too long, head tilted at an angle that doesn't match my own, waiting for me to turn around, waiting for me to acknowledge that the boundary between what is real and what is me has begun to dissolve. The smell of copper and rain grows stronger, and I wonder if I am becoming the shadow, or if the shadow is becoming me. Story 8. When I touch wood, any wood, not just the closet door, the floorboards, the stair rail, even the frame of the window. When my skin touches it, I hear it, barely audible, like words spoken under a blanket. It's coming from inside the closet. I opened it once during the whispers, and the sound vanished. But when I closed it again, the murmur returned, clearer this time. Not words I recognize, more like syllables shaped to mimic meaning. I think it's learning how to talk to me, using the wood as its lungs, and I keep touching it. The house smells different lately. Not old wood and dust like before. Something sweeter, like honey mixed with copper pennies. The scent clings to my fingertips after I press them against the door frame, and I find myself bringing my hands to my nose throughout the day, inhaling that strange perfume. My neighbors would think I'm losing my mind if I told them, but they don't live here. They don't feel the vibrations traveling through the grain. I started keeping a journal. Every surface I touch, every whisper I hear, the patterns are becoming clearer. The kitchen cabinet doors murmur differently than the bedroom floor. The bathroom vanity speaks in shorter bursts. But the closet door, that's where the real conversation happens. Long, flowing streams of almost words that seem to respond when I move my palm across its surface. The whispers started 3 weeks after I moved in. At first, I blamed the old pipes, the settling foundation. Houses make noise, everyone knows that. But pipes don't form consonants. Foundations don't practice vowels. And they certainly don't pause when you stop touching them, as if waiting for you to continue the conversation. I bought a small recorder, the kind journalists use. When I press it against the wood while touching with my other hand, the device captures something. not silence, not quite sound either. Something in between, a frequency that shouldn't exist but does. I've played it back dozens of times, adjusting the speed, filtering the noise. Sometimes, I swear, I can almost understand what it's trying to tell me. The temperature changes too. Not the whole room, just the wood itself. My palm rests against the closet door, and the surface grows warm, then cool, then warm again, like a slow heartbeat made of heat. The grain patterns seem to shift under my touch, swirling in ways that wood grain doesn't normally move. I've stared at that door for hours, watching the lines rearrange themselves into shapes that look almost like letters. My sleep has become restless. I wake up with my hands pressed against the bedroom wall, my palms flat against the painted wood beneath. The whispers are louder in the dark, more urgent. They pull me from dreams I can't remember, drawing me toward surfaces I haven't touched yet. The bookshelf in the living room, the wooden handles on the kitchen drawers. Each one adds its voice to the growing chorus. I tried avoiding it. Wore gloves for 2 days. The whispers became agitated, rising in pitch and volume until I could hear them through the leather. They wanted skin contact. They needed it. And I needed to hear them more than I needed to understand why. The mirror in the bathroom reflects the closet door behind me when I brush my teeth. Yesterday, I noticed something wrong with the reflection. The wood grain in the mirror image moved independently from the actual door. Swirling patterns that spelled out shapes, not letters from any alphabet I recognize, but symbols that felt familiar anyway. Like I'd seen them before in dreams or half-remembered childhood books. I started pressing my ear against the wood while touching it with my hands. The whispers become clearer this way. Not words exactly, but intentions. Meanings that bypass language entirely and speak directly to something deeper. They're trying to show me something, or teach me something. The distinction feels less important each day. The honey copper scent has spread throughout the house. It's strongest near the closet, but present everywhere now. My clothes smell like it, my hair. Even my coffee tastes faintly sweet and metallic. I've stopped trying to wash it away. It's become part of me, just like the whispers have become part of my daily routine. I documented everything, measured the temperature variations, recorded the whispers at different times, photographed the shifting grain patterns. But the evidence only makes sense to me. Anyone else would see normal wood, hear normal house sounds. They don't have the connection I've developed. The closet door grew hot under my palm yesterday. Not warm, hot. Hot enough to sting. But I didn't pull away. The whispers were so clear then, so close to being actual words. I pressed harder, ignoring the burn, and for just a moment I understood. Not the words themselves, but the desperate need behind them. Something was trying to get out, or trying to bring me in. My palm is blistered now. A perfect handprint burned into my skin. But when I touch wood with the injured hand, the whispers are clearer than ever. The burn mark pulses with each syllable, like a tuning fork resonating with sounds only I can hear. The pain is worth it. The connection is worth it. I opened the closet door during the whispers again. This time, I didn't let go of the handle. The sounds continued, but different now. Not coming from inside the closet anymore, coming from the door itself, from the wood grain under my burned palm. The whispers were always in the wood, not behind it. The wood was never a barrier. It was a medium. The realization changes everything. Every wooden surface in the house is connected. A network of whispers flowing through grain and fiber. The closet door isn't special because it's a door. It's special because it's where I first learned to listen. But now I can hear the entire house speaking. My neighbors have started avoiding me. They say I smell different, that I touch things too much. Run my hands along fence posts and porch railings when I walk by. They don't understand that I'm not touching them. I'm listening to them. The whole neighborhood is trying to tell me something. The whispers are strongest now when I sleep. My dreams are filled with wooden voices speaking in languages made of grain and knot. I wake up with my hands pressed against the headboard, my burned palm throbbing with each whispered syllable. The house has become a choir, and I'm the only one who can hear the song. I know what I have to do. The whispers have been building toward this moment, teaching me, preparing me. The closet door is just the beginning. There are other doors, other houses, other wooden surfaces that need someone to listen. Someone who can hear what they're trying to say. My burn mark has started to spread. Not infection, something else. The pattern of the wood grain is growing along my arm, like a tattoo made of living wood. When I touch surfaces now, the whispers aren't just audible. They're part of me, flowing through the grain patterns etched into my skin. I understand now why the house chose me, why the whispers started. I'm not just someone who can hear them, I'm becoming part of them. The boundary between my skin and the wood is disappearing. Soon, I'll be able to speak their language fluently. Soon, I'll be able to whisper back. The closet door is open now. It's been open for days. The whispers don't need it closed anymore. They have a better way to speak. Through me, through the patterns growing along my arms and across my chest, through the grain that's becoming part of my flesh. I touch wood and I am wood. I listen to whispers and I am whispers. The house has found its voice and I am learning to use it. Did you enjoy this story? The eerie merging of flesh and grain, whispers flowing through wood and skin alike, becoming one with the house itself. The boundaries between self and home dissolve as the wood speaks, and the narrator learns a language beyond words, becoming part of the living structure. If your home began whispering through every wooden surface you touched, and those whispers started to leave marks on your skin, would you resist or embrace the connection? How far would you let the house reach inside you? Now, let's move on to the next story. Story 9. The foundation is fine. The inspection said everything was level, but something's pulling, not hard, but constant. I drop things and they roll toward the back wall. I place furniture evenly, and over days it shifts ever so slightly, always in the same direction, toward the forest behind the house. I walk in straight lines and end up drifting. The back door creaks more now. Once, I caught it open with leaves on the mat. The house leans. The nails in the beams groan. And when I step outside, I feel myself tilting too. At first, I blamed the settling. Old houses do that. They breathe, they shift, they find their balance over decades. But this house was built just 5 years ago on solid ground. The contractor assured me the foundation was poured perfectly level. I have the certificates, the measurements, the photographs. Everything should be straight. The coffee cup slides across the kitchen table while I'm reading. Just a fraction of an inch, but enough to leave a wet ring where it started. I pick it up, place it back, and watch. It doesn't move when I'm looking directly at it. But when I glance away, when I turn a page or check my phone, it drifts. Always toward the forest. I started keeping a notebook. Small movements, imperceptible shifts. The lamp on the side table moves 3 inches over a week. The rug bunches up against the back wall. Even the pictures on the walls seem to cant slightly, their frames tilting as if the house itself is breathing in one direction. The smell hits me on a particularly still morning, something earthy and organic, like wet leaves and decomposing wood. It's strongest near the back windows, the ones that face the tree line. I check the basement for moisture, the attic for dead animals, the walls for mold. Nothing. The smell comes and goes, but it's always there underneath, like the house is exhaling something from deep within its bones. I call the contractor. He comes out with his level, his measuring tape, his professional skepticism. He checks the foundation, the floor joists, the support beams. Everything is perfectly level, he says. Not even a quarter inch of deviation. The house is solid, but I watch his tools as he works, and I see them too. The bubble in his level drifting just slightly, the measuring tape sagging toward the back wall when he's not holding it taut. He doesn't notice, or pretends not to. The phone starts making sounds at night. Not ringing, something else. A low hum that rises and falls like breathing. When I pick it up, the dial tone is there, normal and steady. But when I hang up and move away, the humming returns. I record it on my phone, but the playback is just silence. The sound only exists when I'm close enough to hear it directly. I begin to document everything. Time stamps, measurements, photographs. The dining table has moved 6 inches from its original position. The bookshelf leans against the back wall now, though I never remember moving it. The hardwood floors show scuff marks in parallel lines, as if everything in the house is being dragged in the same direction. The forest seems closer now. When I first moved in, there was a clear yard between the house and the trees. Now the edge of the woods appears to have crept forward, though I know that's impossible. Trees don't move. But every morning when I look out the back window, the shadows seem deeper, the canopy more dense, the distance somehow compressed. I start sleeping in the front bedroom. The pull is weaker there, less insistent. But even in my dreams, I feel the house tipping, tilting, like I'm sleeping on a slowly sinking ship. I wake up finding myself pressed against the headboard, as if I've been sliding all night toward the back wall. The door to the basement won't stay closed. I lock it, but find it standing open. The wood around the hinges shows stress marks, as if something has been pulling it from the other side. I go down the stairs with a flashlight, though the electricity works fine. The basement feels different, larger somehow, with shadows that stretch too far and corners that seem to bend at impossible angles. The foundation walls are pristine. No cracks, no settling, no signs of movement. But when I place my hand flat against the concrete, I feel it. A subtle vibration, like a heartbeat, pulsing through the walls. The rhythm is slow, steady, hypnotic. I find myself standing there for long minutes, my palm pressed against the cool concrete, feeling the house breathe. I hire a second contractor, then a third. They all say the same thing. The house is level. The foundation is solid. There's no structural problem. But I see them checking their tools twice, frowning at readings that don't quite make sense. One of them leaves early, claiming he has another appointment. The third one keeps looking over his shoulder toward the forest while he works. The refrigerator has migrated 3 feet from its original position. The kitchen island no longer aligns with the overhead light. I find myself cooking at an angle, my body naturally compensating for the house's tilt. When I pour water, I have to adjust my grip to keep it flowing straight. The house is teaching me its new physics, its altered geometry. I begin to understand that the pull isn't just affecting objects. It's affecting me. When I walk through the house, I lean slightly to the right, countering an invisible force. When I sit, I find myself gripping the arms of chairs. When I stand still, I feel the gentle but persistent tug toward the back wall, toward the forest, toward something I can't name. The windows at the back of the house show a different view now. The trees are definitely closer, their branches reaching toward the glass like fingers. Sometimes I catch movement in the shadows between the trunks, but when I look directly, there's nothing there. Just the forest, patient and dark, waiting. I try to leave, pack a bag, get in my car, drive away. But the pull follows me. Even miles from the house, I feel it, a subtle tug in my chest, a magnetic attraction that draws me back. I find myself taking longer routes home, making excuses to return. The house needs me, I tell myself. Someone has to document what's happening. The back door opens by itself now. I find it standing wide, the threshold scattered with leaves and small twigs. The forest smells stronger, more insistent. When I close the door, I can hear it creaking open again before I've even left the room. The house wants to breathe, to connect, to complete whatever process has already begun. I understand now that the level doesn't matter. The foundation, the measurements, the certificates, they're all meaningless. The house has found its own orientation, its own true north. It's not tilting toward the forest. It's tilting toward something in the forest, something that calls to it with invisible threads of attraction. And I'm part of it now. When I look in the mirror, I see myself at a slight angle, my reflection tilted to match the house's new geometry. When I walk outside, the world seems off-kilter, as if everything else is wrong and only the house, only the forest, only this strange gravitational pull makes sense. The house has chosen its direction, and I'm following. The pull is stronger now, always stronger, and I no longer fight it. Did you enjoy this story? The slow, relentless pull of the house toward something unseen in the forest. An invisible force rewriting the rules of gravity, perception, and self. The house becomes a living compass, shifting not on foundations or measurements, but on a mysterious call from the woods. The narrator's gradual surrender to that pull is chilling and inevitable. If your home started to tilt, not because of broken foundations, but because it was being drawn somewhere else, somewhere alive and unknown, would you resist or accept your new direction? What would it mean to lose your sense of balance to a place that calls you beyond reason?